Jill, the words for the offering were so inspiring, so aspirational, so poetic that I just feel like we should have taken the money and run. And in light of whatever it may have instilled in you and set you up for, I now feel obliged to say that there will be no refunds if today's service doesn't measure up to the promise. After the day on which we are actually born, the days we call birthdays are, in fact, anniversaries of our birth, which is why perhaps the French say joyeux anniversaire instead of happy birthday. Our birthdays are once and done, one time only events. And if you don't believe me, ask your mother. She will remember. But the anniversaries of our birth continue forever. However, once established, idioms and expressions take on lives of their own. So let me say, for the sake of the whole year, happy birthday. Following our service today, we will hold the all-church birthday party. I have looked at the cakes, and I can promise you they are better than the aspirations of this morning's offering. Every single one of them, all 14, look delicious, including some that I might not otherwise indulge myself in, but I will today. I am committed, in your honor, to having a piece of every cake on offer. This is the day on which we will acknowledge that each of us hopes to mark our birthdays at some point during the year. And this event, hosted by our Tuesday evening covenant group, will help each of us to remember how precious all of the others really are in our lives. As I said, we will have 14 cakes, 1 for each month and 2 to accommodate special dietary needs. Although I noticed there was no red meat cake among the offerings, so we're a little limited. But I think we should observe the lunar calendar through an extra cake and force everyone to figure out once a year which lunar month they were born in. But then I'm more of a throwback to ancient traditions than most people here, and also more inclined towards making mischief. So we'll just stick to the original plan, I suppose. But next year, I say, we will go back to the old-time religion and properly align ourselves with the phases of the moon. As it happens, this is a very, very good day in Unitarian Universalist history to celebrate our collective birthdays. An exceptionally good day, in fact. One of the 3 so-called prophets of Unitarianism was born on this day in 1803, Ralph Waldo Emerson, whose Divinity School address of 1838 was one of the landmark orations in the evolution of Unitarianism, not to mention his great works like Nature and Self-Reliance, which have influenced the intellectual life far beyond the limits of our tiny religious community. It is also the birthday in 1810 of William Henry Channing, the nephew of the leading light of the first generation of Unitarians in North America, William Ellery Channing, whose manifesto sermon, Unitarian Christianity, gave us our current name and identity. A minister and eloquent preacher like his uncle before him, William Henry was also a journalist and social reformer, while championing the abolition of slavery, the pursuit of peace, temperance, and the rights of women. Today, he is best remembered for his moving poem, "To live content with small means, to seek elegance rather than luxury, and refinement rather than fashion, to be worthy, not respectable, and wealthy, not rich, to study hard, think quietly, talk gently, act frankly, to listen to stars, birds, babes, and sages with an open heart, to bear all cheerfully, do all bravely, await occasions, hurry never. In a word, to let the spiritual, unbidden and unconscious, grow up through the common. This is to be my symphony. And today, it is our birthday present. And reaching back just 2 days, it was the birthday also in 1810 of Margaret Fuller, who has been described as a woman of singular genius and a teacher of extraordinary gift and influence, not to mention a pioneer feminist and social reformer in several fields, who was a literary critic for the New York Tribune and the editor of the influential transcendentalist magazine, The Dial. Yes, this is a good day, a good week for celebrating the birthdays of eminent Unitarian Universalists, yourselves included. And the three I've mentioned are just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. As it happens, this is also an abundant season for marking the anniversaries of the founding of several Unitarian and Universalist institutions, which have served to maintain and promote our curious way in religion through the centuries. On this day in 1790, the Philadelphia Convention of Universalists met at the local, brace yourselves, Universal Baptist Church. And adopted its Articles of Faith, which paved the way for the Universalist General Convention, and 40 years later, across the pond, the Remonstrant Synod of Ulster was formed by Unitarians who withdrew from the Presbyterian Church to establish a more liberal movement. But tomorrow actually marks the bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of the founding of the American Unitarian Association, which was held at Federal Street Church in Boston. Now, it may surprise some of you to know that the founding convention adopted as its aims to diffuse the knowledge and promote the interests of pure Christianity. Full stop. There were no 7 principles. There were no direct precursors to the 7 principles. It was just to diffuse the knowledge and promote the interests of pure Christianity. And the Unitarians of the era were pretty confident they knew exactly what that meant. They were calling people of faith back to the teachings of Jesus rather than the religion about Jesus. They were calling upon people who called themselves Christians to embrace the idea that it has more to do with ethics and decency than it has to do with believing certain propositions from centuries after the man whose name they claimed was even alive. This development didn't happen overnight. The meeting to organize a movement wasn't a whim. It was the culmination of a liberal evolution within Congregationalism that can be traced back over 2 generations that preceded the event. By 1820, 5 years before the creation of the American Unitarian Association, now the Unitarian Universalist Association, when the Berry Street Conference was established as a gathering for the liberal clergy, about 130 congregations in New England, mostly in Massachusetts, had embraced the liberal Unitarian theology. And the influence of the liberal movement had reached as far as South Carolina by then. A publishing fund was established the next year, and in 1824, an informal group of leading Bostonians known as the Anonymous Association. In hindsight, I wish they'd have called themselves Unitarians Anonymous. The Anonymous Association was established to study the feasibility and lay the groundwork for a new association of liberal congregations. Still, there was resistance, some hoping to preserve unity within the Congregationalist movement, while younger clergy were increasingly impatient for the creation of a bold, new denominational embodiment. At the Berry Street Conference in 1825, the younger clergy triumphed, and the American Unitarian Association was born, forever severing the liberal wing from the rest of Congregationalism. The presidency was offered to William Ellery Channing, who graciously declined while rejoicing in the success of the effort. As one who shunned sectarianism and sought to avoid conflict, even as he often provoked it by answering the call of his conscience, Channing has been described as a reluctant radical, which can be seen in his ambivalence about withdrawing from one denominational association in an effort to create a broader, more inclusive one. If Alanis Morissette were to break in on the sermon right now, she would probably sing "Ironic." Aaron Bancroft was chosen as president instead, and Channing's assistant, Ezra Stiles Gannett, assumed executive responsibility as secretary of the new organization. Reflecting on what he described as a splendid achievement, historian Conrad Wright wrote, "The creation of a more cohesive movement was the task of another generation. Yet the spirituality that these churches cultivated and the ethical and moral earnestness that led them to a remarkable age of philanthropy and social reform are a precious heritage." By sheer coincidence, and without any coordination beforehand, the British and Foreign Unitarian Association was organized in London on the very same day that the American Unitarian Association was founded in Boston. Consider that serendipity, divine providence, or mere coincidence. It's sweetly astonishing. And 75 years later, May the 26th was chosen, but this time intentionally, for the organization of the International Council of Unitarian and Other Liberal Religious Thinkers and Workers, which eventually evolved into the International Association of Religious Freedom. So why does all this matter? Why does any of it matter? It matters because the values of our faith, as they have evolved through the centuries, and as they are held in the current moment, are expressed through the lives of real people and effective institutions. The demands of integrity and congruity are only realized through the actions of living people and the institutions they create to magnify themselves, which are, as Emerson put it, our lengthened shadows in the world. James Luther Adams, who is arguably the most important Unitarian Universalist theologian of the last century, proclaimed, "We deny the immaculate conception of virtue and affirm the necessity of social incarnation. And so we organize to show up and make a difference. We put boots on the ground. We embody the principles we profess as best we can at any given time. The purely spiritual is purely spurious. It is embodied faith that makes a difference in the world. So we strive to be bold and embodied in professing our deepest values. Practice corporeal politics, Timothy Snyder advises us today, as society faces social regression and authoritarianism. Power wants your body softening in your chair and your emotions dissipating on the screen. Get outside, he says. Put your body in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar people. Make new friends and march with them. That's precisely what our forebears were doing when they organized the denominational bodies I've mentioned. And they left their work as a lesson to us today. They were embodying their values and doing so boldly, even though it made some of them uncomfortable, because it disrupted the status quo and offended those who held power, whether by office or by social convention. They were practicing corporeal politics in the field of religion. And that is why we will be doing the same next week when we walk in the Pride Winnipeg parade, supported by our ground crew here in the sanctuary, to show our unwavering opposition to the resurgence of those who would demean their neighbors, deny their worth and dignity, and withhold from them their rights as human beings. We will not allow our bodies to soften in our chairs at this time of threat. We will not allow our emotions to be captured on the screen. We will not be held hostage by the media. We will go outside. We will join those who are, in fact, very familiar to us because they are us, and we will march on familiar ground that is the common possession of this whole community. And we will undoubtedly make new friends as we march and build new relationships for the future. Authoritarians and reactionaries and bigots turn people into numbers, as Snyder observes, but he adds it is for us as humanists to turn the numbers back into people. We will not allow authoritarians and hate mongers to shape society, but rather call upon our common humanity to do so. Instead of displaying symbols of loyalty and power, we will dress in the colors of the rainbow and celebrate the manifold richness of creation. We will acknowledge that whatever and whomever we identify as other is actually a part of ourselves, whether we acknowledge it or not. We will celebrate diversity over uniformity, inclusion over exclusion, and kindness over cruelty. Life is political, not because the world cares about how you feel, but because the world reacts to what you do, declares Timothy Snyder. The minor choices we make are a kind of vote. In the politics of the everyday, our words and gestures, or their absence, count very much. Stand out, he says. Someone has to. It is easy, in words and deeds, to follow along. It can feel strange to do or say something different, but without that unease, there is no freedom. And the moment you set an example, the spell of the status quo is broken, and others will follow. And so we celebrate, and we organize, and we march as we are able, because we intend to break the spell that vexes us and the society in which we live, turning the moral arc of the universe and our small patch of it once again towards justice, equity, and compassion. Please join in our closing hymn, number 1014 in the Teal hymnal, which we will sing as answering the call of love.